We are going to record this session, as you saw. So let's start with some introductions on our team. And so I guess, briefly just want to provide you some information about United Way and our grants team. We kind of work on both sides of the house for grants. We have a team of folks who obviously you know Laleen, and we give out grants to nonprofits like yourselves, and thank you for joining us for this neighborhood grant opportunity. But we also have folks who are raising money, writing grants in partnership with other organizations sometimes, or to try to to increase the pot of funding that comes to Baltimore, comes to Maryland, Central Maryland, to do good work and support the good things that folks are doing. So we have kind of grants going in, grants going out. And so today you will have the opportunity to learn from a team of folks who are experts and have done a lot of grant writing. And today's session will really be, I think, a combination of general, best practices in grant writing, but really also focused on more so on this opportunity and the kind of things we're looking for. So thank you all for joining us. Let's do some team introductions real quick. I'm Rob Clark. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Grants Officer at United Way of Central Maryland. I'll pass it to Shelley.
Hi, I'm Shelley Hallman. I'm the Vice President of Grant Development at United Way. Gabriella.
Hi, I'm Gabriella Giannini, Director of Grant Writing at United Way. I'm passing it to Renee.
Hey, good afternoon. I'm Renee Duzan, Director of Grant Development here at United Way.
Laleen is also on. She's, as you all met her, if you came to the information session that we had last week. And Teresa is also supporting us as well. I don't know if either of them are coming on to say hello, or I'll just say hello on their behalf. And we're also joined by Renee Beck from our marketing, who will be speaking to you all later. You want to say hi, Renee?
Hi, everyone. Renee Beck. I'm the Vice President of Marketing and Innovation at United Way.
Okay, so let's go to the next slide. So we did staff introductions. We're going to go through with some grant writing tips first, and then we're going to, Renee is going to talk to you about the video that is part of what you're able to submit. We encourage you to submit as part of the application. And then we're going to have some questions and answers. So we'll be monitoring the chat, but I think we're going to, for the most part, hold off on questions. We can hold off on grant writing questions. So after the grant writing part, and then video questions after that. Next slide. And so before we dive into this, the other thing I just want to point out is that I assume most of you know, or most of you attended the neighborhood grant information session we had last week. So at that grant information session, we dove into and spent a lot of time looking at things like eligibility, walking through the application portal, and those kind of things. We don't want to duplicate that, because I know many of you attended that. If you did not attend that, and especially if you have questions in that area, I'd really advise you to go and look. Both the PowerPoint presentation and the recording of that session are on our website with these application materials. So you can go and watch those. And we will also have questions that were raised there, as well as other questions that people email us. We're collecting those, and we will post those responses in writing on our website too in the coming week. Okay, so I'm just going to kick off. Back up one slide, sorry. I'm just going to kick off with on this slide, just to reiterate what we're looking for. So the selection criteria, the things that really, as we have our volunteer community member who read and score and rate the applications, for this application in particular, we're really looking for these things to come through, that what you're proposing to do is really kind of centered around your community, builds on its assets of your community or addresses needs in your community, that it is resident driven. So it's not that you kind of have the ear of the folks in the community, either whether it's a neighborhood or a broader community that you're serving, and you've listened to them, you've engaged them, you're responding to them. they're engaged in some level of planning and implementation as well, would be also, great as part of your what you're doing. That they inspire connections within the community, within your community. So opportunities for folks to work together, to connect with each other. I think we all know how important that is, especially, I feel like we're still coming off of COVID. One day we can stop saying we're on the tail end of COVID, but I don't think we're quite there yet. But I know we're all still in the work of kind of reconnecting or making sure we're having some opportunities for that. Plus, it builds neighborhood, it builds support networks, all those kind of things, and then shows promise of impact. And so with those 4 things in mind, and you'll see we kind of reinforce those at different places along the way. I'm going to pass it on to Shelley, who's going to walk you through some of the specific questions and some tips.
Sure, thanks, Rob. So we're going to go through each of the questions in the application and give you guys some tips about what to include. This info is specific to our grant application for the neighborhood grants, but I mean, you really can take these tips and apply them to any grant application you're working on. Any grant reviewer is going to want to know this information. So the first question that we're addressing is about your organization in general. So the question is, tell us about your organization and its connection to the community you propose to serve. So this is where we really want you guys to introduce yourselves to the grant reviewer. Pretend that they have no idea who you are, and start at the beginning. When were you founded? Who founded you? If you were founded when a group of community members came together because they were sick of seeing trash on the street, we want to know that. That's exactly the type of thing that the grant reviewers want and need to know. What is your mission? If you have a strategic plan, you can mention that in this section and talk about what the goals are in your strategic plan. We just want to know what your overall purpose is, essentially your elevator pitch. Give us a little more information about your organization. So if the majority of your staff, your board are members of your community, that's the sort of thing we want to know. If you don't have staff and you're a volunteer organization, that is also something that we want to know. So just a general overview of who makes up your organization and how big your organization is. How many staff do you have? How many volunteers do you have? How big is your board? That's all really helpful insight. And then finally, and I know this is a lot of information to include in, I think 300 words or less, but the final thing you want to make sure you include in this section is what's the work that you're doing? So how many people are you serving? And that could be people you're actually serving through programs. So say like the number of people that come through your food bank each year, or the number of kids that come to your after school program. It could also mean the number of people that are volunteering with your community each year. So say you organize the food pantry and you have 50 volunteers a year. That's also a great statistic to include because it shows that you're not only serving the community, you're engaging the community and you're providing an opportunity for community members to come together. So focus on both sides of that number. So the number you're serving and the number you're engaging through volunteer events and things like that. And then provide a few examples of the work you're currently doing. So tell us about a couple of the programs, a couple of the projects you're working on, and really emphasize anything that's resident driven. So anything that started because community members came together and decided they want to do this. Anything that is really just driven by the community itself. We'll go to the next section. The next question is more about the neighborhood and the community in general. So the prompt is, tell us about your neighborhood/community. So you want to tackle this in 2 ways. So the first is to use data. Use data to tell us who makes up your community. And we're going to go into some data sources on the next 2 slides. So what are the demographics? What's the racial and ethnic breakdown? What's the age breakdown? Do you have a disproportionate number of senior citizens in your community? Do you have a large immigrant population that may not speak English? Do you have a a large ethnic group living in your community? Those are the sort of things we want to know and understand. We just want to give grant reviewers a better sense of who you are. But we also want you to go beyond the data. So provide us with the data, but then also look beyond it and what makes your community unique. What makes it stand out? What are some of the people and organizations in your community? So that's like what I was talking about with some of the, if you have a specific ethnic group or things that might not show up in the data, like maybe you have a small immigrant population if you look at the data from the 2020 census, but you know that it's growing because you live in the community and you see the people coming into your community. And you're working on a project to really engage and serve those immigrants. So those are the sort of things that we want to know, like sort of go beyond the data and tell us about what you see happening in the community on a day-to-day basis. Also focus on your strengths. If one of your strengths is you have a super involved community group like yourselves who are applying, tell us about that. If you have a lot of schools in the area, that's a great strength. If you have a rec center, any sort of just assets or strengths your neighborhood has. And then also, of course, we want to hear about the challenges your neighborhood is facing. And so that could include anything from public safety issues to litter and trash, to a lack of after school or summer programs, to a lack of grocery stores if your community is a food desert, anything like that. Those are the sort of challenges that we want to hear about. And then the last point to keep in mind for all of this is make the connection to your project. So if your project is a community garden, then I would focus, when you're talking about the challenges in your neighborhood, focus on litter, on trash, on the fact that your community is a food desert, things that tie in to the fact that you want to build a community garden. If your focus of your application is on an after school program, then I would talk about the schools in your community and talk about maybe the lack of programs that are available for kids in your community after school or during the summer months, and maybe talk about juvenile crime rates or anything else that ties into your project. As someone who's read these applications in the past, sometimes applications can seem a little all over the place. And so you really want to be as specific and focused as possible and really tie everything together. Go to the next slide. So as we mentioned, these are some of the data sources that we wanted to share with you guys. We will be sending out this PowerPoint after the meeting. I don't know if we'll send it out, but I know it definitely will be available to you all on our website. So do not feel like you have to jot all of these down, but we just wanted to provide a few sources that we use a lot in our own grant applications to funders. I'll just briefly mention a few of these. If you're a group in Anne Arundel County, you may already be familiar with the Poverty Amidst Plenty report, but that is a really awesome report that dives really deep, I believe by zip code, into some of the issues in Anne Arundel County. Baltimore City, the Baltimore Neighborhood Indicators Alliance, their Vital Signs website lets you search by neighborhood, and it lets you compare your neighborhood to both other neighborhoods and to the city as a whole. And it gives you just a whole bunch of data. I probably use that website for every application I write for Baltimore City. Howard County, this is a new report, the state of women and girls in Howard County. A lot of great information and data there. And then we also wanted to point you to some things that would be helpful regardless of the jurisdiction that you're serving. So our Alice report it provides county level data on Alice families. So that's going to look at income and racial breakdowns and poverty level. And it's an interactive report if you go to the website that's listed here. And so you'll be able to look at your specific county and compare data to previous years. The Maryland report card has great school level data. If your program serves a specific school or multiple schools, that's a great place to go. And then the Annie Casey Kids Count Data Center has really great data for anything related to youth. So again, you don't need to write these down. We will share these slides after this meeting. We just wanted to share these resources with you guys. All right, I believe we're moving on to Gabriella to talk more about the project.
Yeah, thanks, Shelley. So generally speaking, at its core, a grant proposal is really a well-supported narrative that aims to persuade the grant maker or reviewer to support your mission and to fund your project. Grant proposals for project funding, they really need to highlight the value of your program and include a detailed plan for addressing those community shared challenges and how this project will benefit your community. So in the project information section of the neighborhood grant, which is really the meat of your proposal, it's where you should be including the who, what, and where of your project. In this section, you're going to want to answer how many residents you will engage or serve. Be specific about what you will accomplish, such as building a garden or hosting a festival or parade, and really be realistic about making those goals and make them time sensitive as well. So what can you accomplish during the 9-month grant period? Make sure to provide a really clear timeline. And it's in this section where you can get into the specifics of your plan and how you'll achieve the goals and the objectives. And this can include a step-by-step implementation plan or a timeline for the overall project. So a successful application, I just want to reinforce that in a successful application, your project needs to meet the main selection criteria. So make sure you do refer to the selection criteria as you work through the application. And we are looking for grant applications that meet the main selection criteria and that address at least one of the 3 project categories that are listed here. So building vibrant neighborhood spaces, inspiring community connections, and/or empowering local leaders. And when we talk about building vibrant neighborhoods, we'd like you to highlight how you can build connections with your community and how your project is really neighborhood centered. So reviewers are going to be looking at how your application, how you know your community and how that has like the history with your neighborhood and describe your relationship. So the project really needs to build on the neighborhood assets and addressing those neighborhood needs. And then if the inspiring community connection is in alignment with your proposed project, I'd suggest really talking about being connected to your community members and highlighting how the project brings community members together to accomplish goals and discuss neighborhood priorities. And if you also intend on talking about the empowering local leaders and aligning with that project category, the project must really engage residents in high-level input. And reviewers are looking for you to describe how residents are incorporated into the design and implementation process of that project. So resident support needs to be leading the project. So on to the next slide. Here is where you can describe how your project will benefit your community. And some of the things you might assess or evaluate are whether residents will be more engaged or connected, whether the community will be safer, whether it will be cleaner, healthier, more beautiful. I mean, there's a tons of questions you can come up with, but really it's setting the purpose of your goals and objectives in this section of the grant application. And it helps funders understand whether or not your organization is accomplishing what you set out to do in your original proposal. So identify the desired outcomes from this project and what will mark it as a success. Goals are really only useful if you can measure their success. So as an applicant, you should create tangible, time-sensitive, and realistic goals that will help you evaluate, whether it's through quantitative or qualitative analysis. And then on the next slide, we have additional resources that might help with your grant writing. Maryland Philanthropy Network and Maryland Nonprofits are both great resources that I've used in my grant writing, and they provide different grant writing resources and tips for strengthening a proposal. And there are even some LOI and full proposal templates that you may find useful. So I suggest checking those out as you work through the application. And then I believe, Rob, we pass it on to you for the budget slide.
Okay, so really the budget is, again, we're not asking for you to, we're not trying not to make this too complicated. In the application, there is a basic budget, there's basic budget categories. I guess the main tip here is everything, just to let you know, so when you enter a budget amount, it will open up a text box and ask you to kind of provide some details. And so just a tip on this is that, you never want to leave like the grant reviewers questioning why, how somebody got to a number, or, does this make sense? So just provide a little bit of information. So if you are, for example, paying stipends to adults to support this work, just include the number of adults times the amount of stipend for each one, and that's how you got to $2,000, for example. Maybe it's 20 people, $100 each, or something like that. So just provide a little bit of detail so that people just, again, so that they have a sense of what you're getting at. And, obviously make sure your grant falls within the range of $2,500 to $10,000. We do ask a question, will this require, is this the total cost of your grants? Like if let's say you're applying for $8,000, is that, does your project cost more than that? And if so, what's the total cost, and do you have other sources identified? So it's always good to, or at least some other sources or some other plan to raise that money, or some thoughts. So the more you can give confidence in, I think the one thing to guard against is putting out something. Let's say it's there's a much larger expense. This is a very small part of it, and it's very unclear whether or not you're going to be able to raise it other funding. That always gives grant reviewers pause, because they're like, well, what happens if we give them a grant for 8,000, but it really sounds like they can't pull this off unless they raise the full 50, and they haven't given us a lot of confidence. So, if it's something like, but it's fine to be real about, let's say you're asking for 10, we know $10,000 is not a lot, right? It can be helpful, and it can be really help move some folks' work forward, but maybe your project is $12,000 or $15,000 and 10,000 is only a part of it, and you have other good sources. And so that would be positive to say, this 10,000 is really going to help kind of close the gap that we have on this project we've been planning. So just kind of think about those things as part of what you're providing within the budget section. So let's before we move on to video, why don't we see if there's any questions in the chat we want to address related to the grant narrative tips we've been providing.
Right now, there are no questions in the chat.
Okay, well, so you guys continue to think about questions and that you may have, and we'll move on to Renee Beck.
Sure. So a lot of this information that's been provided to you so far is really great to think about when you put together a video. First of all, video does not have to be fancy. Do not be intimidated. I know sometimes it can sound scary to think about putting together a video. Your phone works. iPhone, Android, whatever you have is very simple. No need to be fancy. Try to choose a well-lit area and have the light on your face. I can tell you right now, I'm in a room where I am facing the windows rather than having the windows behind me. So that's an important thing to think about, so we can actually see your faces. Speaking loudly and clearly, and this goes into the next bullet here, is practicing. Run through it a few times. Think about what you want to say. Write down a few bullet points so that you stay on message. You don't have to rehearse the whole thing. You don't have to say anything from scratch. Really make from a script, but try to make it authentic. Think about visuals too. These videos are short, but I thought about what Shelley was saying earlier about if you have a community garden. If you have a community garden and that's what you're promoting, take your video out in the garden so we can actually see that and see what you are working on. And part of that is this last part about letting your enthusiasm and your passion shine through. Let us see why you're so excited and what this grant can really do. And one tip I did not include on here is we often take video in vertical mode if you're used to social media, you're often taking things in vertical mode to post on Instagram, on stories and things like that. Try, if you can, to take photos in horizontal mode. So again, with your phone this way, turn it on its side and take them in horizontal mode. Those are just easier to use in different capacities, to share them. If we're sharing a video on screens, that's really the best mode to take them in. So happy to answer any questions, but my biggest tip of the video is don't overthink it, just be authentic and share your enthusiasm with us.
Great, and I just want to encourage you to include a video. They're not mandatory, but the reviewers have really expressed how much they can really add to folks. There's the written word is one thing, but they really kind of help bring your proposal to life. They help kind of, you get the feel of the neighborhood a little bit more. The enthusiasm, as Renee said, really can go a long way to put a face to the application and some enthusiasm behind it. And so we strongly recommend that you do include the video, and but we don't want we don't want you investing in anything professional. The tips that Renee provided were great, and that's what we're looking for.
Rob,
We do have a
some
hand up.
Yes.
Yeah.
Denise, do you want to go ahead?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. And Miss Renee Beck, right? The question I had was, how long of a video? Because I might have missed that when I attended the other day, but you didn't say anything about the length. So how long?
Up to 90
And I'm
seconds.
actually going to check with her. Yeah, I was going to say, I want to check with her. 90 seconds, Rob?
Yeah.
90 seconds?
90 seconds.
Right.
Okay. Thank you.
And someone asked in the chat, are there parameters of how much you want us to share via video? And I think what Renee said is accurate. We just want to get a better sense of what your project is. So show us your community garden. Show if you run an after school program, maybe show us where the program meets. Introduce yourself. We just want to get a better sense of who you are and how you'll use the money.
There's also another question asking the max grant amount. I believe you said it was 10,000.
It is 10,000, and the links to the application is on our website. Trying to make sure I give you the right info. So if you go to uwcm.org, I'm pulling it up on my phone as we speak. And you go to what we do, and then to nonprofit funding. Everything is right there. So there's the RFP, there is the link to the application, there's a recording from the information session, and there will be the recording and the slides from this presentation will be there as well.
And Laleen just shared that link in the chat for everyone.
Any other questions before we let everyone go?
Just remember, if other questions come up, we have on the website, on our where Laleen put the link in, and I'll just follow the link right now, just so I am making sure I provide you the right information. We have, as you'll see under the neighborhood grant, we have information about questions, and you can submit questions, follow the instructions here to email address, grantquestions@uwcm.org. You can submit those up until Wednesday at 5 o'clock. So in 2 days, you have 2 more days to submit questions, and then look for the responses to all the questions that have been raised at the information session. And today will be posted by a week from today, next Monday.
There
We
is
have
another.
another, yeah, Sandy Ryan.
Once the application is submitted, how long does the process take if you are approved?
Rob, Lillian.
Sorry. Yes. So since the applications are due, we plan to use and with the holidays there, we're going to make decisions by mid-January. So you should be notified by mid-January whether or not you have been approved. And then we will try to quickly turn around and get started with grant application, with a grant agreements, and by the beginning of February. So the grant period is February through October, so 9 months. And, you know, for those folks who are approved, we will let you know in January and try to get your agreements to you and your check to you early February.
Ready, thank you.
Hi, this is Denise again. So we would receive the whole $10,000 check, or is it done incrementally?
So for this grant, and you know, if you're applying for 10,000 and you're approved for 10,000, then yes, it would just be, we would provide the full amount at the time of the contract, and you would, you know, we're trying to keep reporting down to a minimum. We would want like a mid-year check-in where you tell us how things are going, and then just a brief end of the grant period report where you indicate how you spent the funds and, you know, what your, you know, kind of what successes you had, challenges you had, those kind of things.
All right, thank you.
Sure.
I'm not seeing any other questions, so I think we can wrap up. And like Rob said, everything will be on our website. You've got a couple more days to send in questions, so please send us your questions if you have them. We got one more raised hand, Johnny.
Sorry, I apologize. And if I missed this question, are there any, I guess, restrictions that jump out on what funds cannot be used for?
Yeah, if you look at so hopefully you've looked at the RFP and also go back and look at the recording of the, you know, that's part of the, or even the PowerPoint slides. There, you know, the fund, just briefly, the fund should be used obviously to support the program that you're describing. I think the only real limitations that we've set forth include, trying to remember, but I shouldn't remember. I should pull up the actual information just to make sure I'm being exact with you. Give me 1 second.
Sure, thank you.
Well, there is an area that mentions ineligible activities, and it says religious activities, lobbying activities, individuals applying on their own behalf, and compensation to individuals under 14 years of age.
There you go. Thank you for that.
Got it.
That's exactly
Thank
what I
you
was
very
looking
much.
for. So no, I appreciate that. Yes. So you're eligible as a religious nonprofit organization. Nonprofits are eligible to apply, but the activities cannot be, you know, religious in nature. So it can be obviously the other things we've talked about, like youth development programs or gardening or whatever, leadership development, just not religious activities, if that makes sense.
Also, if I may add, organizations that have received this grant for the past 2 years are not eligible for this year. And just want to make sure everybody's aware of that.
And I also just wanted to weigh in on one question in the chat. Somebody asked, is there such a thing as too much information? So pay attention to the word counts in the application. And then I also want to stress for this and for other grant applications, make sure that your application makes sense. If you are asking for money for your community garden, we don't necessarily need to know all about the after-school program you also run at an elementary school. You know, you don't want to confuse grant reviewers. So I would just say be as focused and specific as possible. We have another raised hand, Andrew.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood this from the info session, but did you say that if our organization had received a neighborhood grant at last year, we would not be eligible this year?
I can answer that. Andrew, this is Laleen. If you receive, so this is the 3rd year of the grant. If you received the grant in 2021 and 2022, you are not eligible to apply for 2023.
Okay, but if we only received it in 2022, we would be eligible in 2023.
Correct. Yes.
Okay, that's what I thought. Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
There's another question in the chat. Can it be used to pay staff salaries?
So yes, absolutely. You know, it should be evident that the staff are be working on the project that you're proposing, but absolutely.
Any other questions? All right, well, thanks everyone. We really appreciate you guys joining us and we look forward to seeing all the applications.
Thank you all. Have a great day. I'll just say this for any of you who care, go Ravens tonight. So.
Woohoo!
All right, have a good one.
Take care.